X4 Foundations remains one of the best space games you can buy today, and with the latest free update 7.0, there's never been a better time to jump in. Now, in my opinion, and some may feel this is a pretty bold claim, this is the perfect alternative to Elite Dangerous. Of course, they're both very different games, completely different games really, existing on the opposite ends of a spectrum, but as we get through this video, I think you'll understand why I'm making the comparison. Version 7 then brings a whole bunch of brand new content to the game, expanding it significantly. It also improves the graphics, not to mention adds some much needed tutorials. Alongside this 7.0 update is a brand new expansion called Timelines. I made a video on that the other day, so do check that one out. I'll link it on the screen, as well as in the video description. Today I also want to address a few misunderstandings from that previous video, so we'll be talking about all of that as well. Right then, now I thought long and hard about how to discuss X4. There's a lot of people out there who haven't really heard about this franchise, and I can tell that based on some of the comments I saw on my previous videos. Quite a few people there saying that they'd never even heard of the X series, despite playing games for many years, decades in fact in some cases. So I thought about going through point by point on what X4 is all about, but ultimately decided against that. And the reason for that is I know there are a lot of fans of Elite Dangerous that follow this channel. So really, I feel perhaps one of the best ways to describe X4 is by comparing it to Elite Dangerous. So we'll start right there. Now, as I said, Elite Dangerous and X4 are two very different games. They do exist on the opposite ends of the spectrum. If for no other reason, then X4 is entirely a single-player game, whilst Elite Dangerous is an online multiplayer game. But ultimately, I do feel this is a fair comparison because both of these titles are kings in their respective fields. Now, I'm not going to go into a point-by-point comparison. That would be completely beside the point, it would miss the entire point. What I want to do is compare the broad overall strokes. So let's start with, how these games are structured. Now, when it comes to Elite Dangerous, I think many of you will agree that the individual gameplay loops within Elite are second to none. In terms of spaceship flight, the flight model, it has arguably the best flight model out there. It is super good and has always been since day one. The same is also true when it comes to combat. Space-based combat is absolutely exceptional in Elite Dangerous. In fact, we can go down a point-by-point checklist in the same way. Mining, for example, is absolutely brilliant. Whilst exploration is somewhat lacking in terms of some key gameplay loops, it nonetheless takes place in arguably the best galaxy out there. There's nothing quite like it. In short, I do believe and personally feel that a lot of Elite's success comes down to the fact that Frontier expertly crafted each of these individual gameplay loops. Where it all come falling down a little bit though, again in my personal opinion, is in how Frontier connected these gameplay loops together. Ultimately, they didn't really do a great job there. The individual gameplay loops don't feel so cohesive in Elite. It feels like you're taking part in a whole galaxy with these small little individual components of gameplay. It kind of works. I mean, you've got this massive galaxy in which you can participate in multiple different activities, but ultimately each of those activities doesn't really have a dramatic impact upon each other. And perhaps this comes down to the ultimate design philosophy of the game, and that is because you as an individual player within the game do not matter. Your actions have no consequence, at least not on their own. Perhaps combined you can influence the background simulation and other aspects of the game, but as a standalone entity, you really don't matter. You're just another number, another person. But please bear with me because all of this is going somewhere, and that takes me directly to X4. This is completely on the other side of the same coin. Here, in X4, every single thing you do does matter. You have the potential to become a true king of the galaxy, and everything you do within the game can have a massive consequence. And that's not because you are the chosen one, you're not the central character in a massive story. Nope, instead, you have the ability to participate in a massive sandbox universe, inside of which you can construct a massive empire. Whether this is a massive trade empire, a manufacturing empire, a war-focused empire, or whatever else you decide to choose, really, the choice ultimately is yours. In the end then, X4 as a space game is very much more than the sum of its individual parts. Whereas in Elite Dangerous you have exceptional individual gameplay loops, X4 is somewhat on the opposite side of that. It doesn't have the best flight model out there, it certainly doesn't have the best space-based combat. Mining is very good, but it doesn't compare to those asteroid cracking moments where you rip open an asteroid in Elite Dangerous. But all of that is entirely beside the point, because collectively all the individual parts of X4 really combine together to make a truly epic game, unlike anything else out there. It really is one of the best, if not the best space games on the market today. Not because of its individual gameplay loops, but rather because how everything connects together so cohesively. So do remember that point, because it's a key point, a key piece of information that I want to revisit when I discuss the X4 Timelines expansion further into this video. So yes, if you want to exist in a galaxy in which, well, you can pretty much do anything that you can shape to your will, then X4 is certainly the game you want to look at. And there's never been a better time, like I say, to play it than with the release of the upcoming 7.0 expansion, the 7.0 update. This update is entirely free, and it does dramatically overhaul many parts of the game. Most importantly, at least in my opinion, is the introduction of the brand new tutorials. There's a whole bunch of these, and they will teach you to play the game start to finish. Now, it's no secret that X4 is very hard to get into, and has always been the case, and a lot of people can bounce right off it when they first jump in. The new tutorials then go a long way to completely alleviate that particular problem. The tutorials work from the absolute beginning on how to pilot the ship, for example, how to walk around within the game, how to interact with objects. They move on to intermediate type tutorials where you can get involved in trading, combat, mining, and all the other big parts of X4, and then end up on the advanced tutorials which teach you how to manage stations, station construction, and how to network your entire empire together. You see, inside of X4, the entire galaxy is fully simulated, and that means every single object, every single ship is persistently tracked. This includes your own ships, whether they're the individual fighters, the large capital ships you own, or even the full-on stations, but it also includes all the ships from other factions, whether they be hostile or friendly as well. So everything is tracked, and this includes all of their actions. It means that, to all intents and purposes, ships will physically move objects and resources from A to B, and this fulfills the whole economic need of the game and creates a massive chain of supply and demand. This is something you can take advantage of for your own benefits when building your own empire. So X4 then delivers these long-needed, much-needed tutorials which will introduce you to pretty much every aspect of the game. Now, it doesn't end there. Arguably, 7.0 is one of the largest, if not the largest, free updates that Egosoft have ever released for X4. Which means it's not just about the new tutorials. Indeed, there's something here for everyone, including long-term veteran players of the franchise. So this includes redesigned capital ships. Egosoft have completely reimagined the Teladi and Argon massive capital ships, and these will be making an appearance in 7.0. New sectors and landmarks are also making an appearance, so there will be new places to explore and things to discover. For those of you who like using the external camera system, this has been improved, which should overall give a bit of a better experience, making things generally easier to use. For true veterans of the game who have got all the way through and built their own empire and have pretty much everything they could ever want, there's a new game mode, a new endgame challenge called the Existential Crisis. Elsewhere, there's been some technical improvements made to the game. This is specifically related to the game's engine. I do believe it's called the X-Tech 5 engine. And this has added the anti-aliasing. This is something that people have wanted for a very long time. So that is now a feature for the game. There's also been some improvements to the graphics, so improved shadows, as well as, I do believe, improved explosions as well. So there is a massive list of additions that come with the 7.0, and I'll include a link in the video description where you can find all of those individual details, those extra details, out for yourself. But we've pretty much covered some of the broad strokes here. Now, 7.0 is not the only thing releasing on the 20th for X4. There's also a brand new expansion called X4 Timelines. Now, I spoke about that in the video earlier this week. I've got a dedicated video for that. You can look at that. Again, I'll link that in the video description. And the update itself, X4 Timelines, is going to be releasing on the 20th of June. And this is a massive update for the game. It is a paid update, and for those of you who already own the Community of Planets edition on Steam, you'll be able to get a discount on X4 Timelines by completing your bundle on Steam once the X4 Timelines has been released on Thursday the 20th of June. I do believe around 1800 BST. It's a bundle that's actually worth looking at because X4 has been around for a number of years now, and Egosoft have released many updates for the game, dramatically expanding it over time. Egosoft then are not the type of developers to just sit back and let things dwell. Instead, they're constantly improving upon and further developing the X4 game. Now, as for my X4 Timelines video, but there are a few points that I want to clarify from that previous video. I do believe, reading the comments, there was a few misunderstandings about some of the things I mentioned in the video. Now, one of the things I mentioned was that, X4 Timelines, just as a very quick overview here, very quick summary, is not a traditional expansion for X4. Previously, all X4 extensions, all X4 expansions have added entire new sectors, new factions to the game. In fact, they're all about expanding the sandbox universe. Now, Timelines is very different. It does expand the X4 universe a little. It does have some new sectors and some new content, but that's not the primary goal here. And even those new additions, those new expansions, have to actually be unlocked by certain gameplay. And that gameplay comes in the form of individual missions. These have to be completed sequentially. You start the first mission, it then, once completed, unlocks the next mission, and so on, all the way through until you've completed the first chapter, at which point the second chapter will unlock, where you thereby do the same, and each mission is completely different. Now, the missions take place in key moments from the game's past, so they're very much lore focused. And one of the things I mentioned in the video is that I wasn't a fan of this type of format. One of my key issues with this structure is that these individual missions, these individual slices of gameplay, appear to be aimed towards brand new players. In fact, the Steam sales page actually states that. It says, using novel ways to introduce new players to X4's core gameplay mechanics, X4 Timelines will also delight the long-serving space adventures. With a thrilling new storyline which takes place outside of the X4 sandbox, prepare yourself for colossal challenges and unexpected excursions into the depths of the X series lore and history. Now, my main concern with this particular approach is that when you jump into these individual X4 Timelines missions, they don't actually teach you anything. They don't give you any guidance. They don't really give you any instructions. For example, the first mission places you on a racetrack and then tells you to fly towards an objective, but it doesn't tell you how to do that or why you need to do that. So whilst this is certainly a good thing for veteran players, it's not so good for new players who are jumping in to try and experience the game for the first time. Of course, brand new players are free to try out the tutorials first, and Egosoft do in fact advise players to try out the tutorials first. And whilst the tutorials are absolutely exceptional, they're really, really good, and they're fully voiced, these Timelines missions could do with not full-on tutorials, but just a little bit of guidance, a little bit of text to guide you along the way. So this is something I pointed out in my Timelines video, but it's something that was a little bit misunderstood, where people felt I was saying that the game doesn't contain any tutorials. So yes, X4 traditionally hasn't had much in the way of tutorials. That has been improved with 7.0, where you can jump in into full tutorials right now. My key concern is that the X4 Timelines missions themselves, at least in my personal opinion, don't provide anywhere near enough guidance for brand new players, which seems to be a pretty big omission for an expansion that is designed to use novel ways to introduce new players to X4's core gameplay mechanics. The second point I want to clarify from my previous video is that I said was to the effect that the X4 Timelines missions, in my personal experience, again, this is all entirely subjective, it's just how I feel, don't really feel that rewarding to me. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not rewards. You can play through those missions and get unlocks such as old ships from the past. These have been redesigned. You'll then be able to use them in the open world sandbox. Now, anyone who's followed this channel for any length of time will know that I'm not a big fan of unlocks for gameplay. I feel that any gameplay should be good enough to stand on its own. And this comes back to that key point I mentioned earlier on in the video. Remember, I was comparing X4 to Elite Dangerous, and I said that Elite Dangerous has some exceptional game loops, but that Frontier missed out on the opportunity to cohesively gel them together. But meanwhile, X4 is far more than the sum of its parts. It has an absolutely amazing game world, perhaps one of the best out there in the space game genre. But for the individual game loops, such as flying, such as the flight mechanics, such as combat, they're really not the best out there. They're not the truly great examples. And this, in my opinion, is where the X4 Timelines extension falls down. You see, the design decision for X4 Timelines was to create individual slices of X4 gameplay, so players could jump in and participate in races, they could participate in mining or combat or whatever else they choose outside of the open world sandbox mode. It's a laudable goal, and I'm very actually pleased to see Egosoft always willing to try something new. However, as the individual components of X4 are not really the best examples of the space game genre, it doesn't have the best flight model, it doesn't have the best combat, these individual slices of gameplay are not really the best. They don't represent X4 in its perfect fashion. That's just my take, and it's what I meant when I said these individual missions within X4 Timelines are not all that rewarding. So something I do feel that was misunderstood by a few of the comments on the previous video, so something I just wanted to address there and clarify. But of course, everyone's going to have their own take on that. Everyone's going to feel different, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy that, especially long-term fans of the game. The fact those missions are lore heavy, the fact they also represent taking part in key moments of the X history is something I'm sure many people are certainly going to enjoy. It's just that it's not for me. And for the reasons I've already mentioned, I'm not entirely convinced that this is the optimal approach for new players. So that's those clarifications out of the way. In my opinion, X4 Timelines is a bit of a mixed bag, but X4 itself is and remains an absolutely amazing game, and the 7.0 update improves it dramatically. So as I said then, X4, there's never been a better time to play. If you're a fan of the space game genre, if you've been playing something like Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen for a lot of time and now fancy something different, or if you've never heard of the X4 series before and now fancy trying it out, regardless of your situation and position, I do feel that now is a great time to jump in and take a look. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. It's been a pretty long one. I'll catch you all next time, and do take care.